Well, hey there. Thanks for joining us and choosing to spend a little bit of time with us today.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we ask this every single episode. And guess what? We're going to ask again. Would you rate and review the show wherever you might be listening? Now, here's why that's so important. There are millions of others just like you who are navigating blended family life, and they're really struggling. And you probably know that it's easy to get lost in all the options that are Googled out there for some support. And it's often the feedback of participants that helps others to decide which resources are the best fit for them. So, your small contribution to the ratings and the reviews could be a huge difference maker for someone else who is desperate for practical support. So, I once again want to invite you to just share your feedback and share your favorite episode out on social so that you can make a difference in someone else's journey. All right, honey, what are we focused on today?
Well, we're excited today to be able to connect with our special guest, Amy J.L. Baker. Dr. Baker is a nationally recognized expert in parental alienation and parent-child relationships, especially children of divorce and emotional abuse of children. She has a PhD in developmental psychology from Teachers College of Columbia University. She's the author or co-author of 10 books and over 120 academic articles on topics related to children's well-being. So we're very excited. Now, whether you've experienced parental alienation or not, today's conversation is a powerful one for anyone who is parenting a child who's hurt, angry, rejecting, or distant. They are known as hard kids. It's an acronym that we're going to talk about.
Yep.
And we'll be talking with Amy about her book called Parenting Under Fire. So grab a notepad because you'll want to jot down some practical tips and strategies that Amy's going to share. And we'll hop into the conversation on the other side of the intro. See you there.
Welcome to the Blended Family Breakthrough Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike and Kim.
We believe in a world where blended families can experience a future full of hope, connection, and peace.
That's why we offer tools, strategies, and guidance that move you from a place of confusion and conflict to experiencing a life of confidence and connection.
We're so glad you're joining us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations as we cover everything from romance to parenting, and yes, even dealing with that difficult ex.
So if you're ready to experience breakthrough in your blended family, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome, Amy. We're so excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. I just wanted to say I recently read your book, Parenting Under Fire, and it kind of blew me away. I mean, it's amazing. I wish we had read this book back when we were parenting a hard child, a difficult situation. And I'm wondering if you can just kind of share what motivated you or inspired you to write this book and a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure. So this, I think, was my 10th book. I didn't really intend to write another book. But I found that in my coaching, I was sort of going over the same things over and over again. For example, one of my favorite tools is something I call the 5 steps. It's on page 29 in the book. It takes me 30 minutes to really explain it and do a good job. You know, I can do the 2-second version, but that's not really going to help my client. And I found, you know, I was going over the same things over and over again because they're sort of the hit parade of helpful advice that I have. It's not the only thing I have to offer, but it's sort of the culmination of a lot of what I do in coaching. And I kind of started to feel bad spending time. My clients pay me a certain amount an hour, and I'm thinking, gee, a $20 book is going to be much more efficient for, you know, cheaper, easier, more accessible to the client. So that was really why I wrote the book. I wanted to give people who don't have the luxury of paying for a coach or just come across the book on their own and maybe don't even know that I exist in the real world as a coach. And so I wanted to get the information out there. And it really touches on the main things that my clients want to know. How do I enhance the attachment with my child? How do I navigate conflict? What values should I be trying to instill in my child to inoculate them from alienation? How, why, when, where, what to text? How do I reach out to an adult child who's cut me off? So the first third of the book is in-person communication with a hurt, angry, rejecting, distant child. The middle third is texting. The final third is reaching out through a letter.
Yes. Wow. Sounds like it was really an act of service to write this book.
Yeah, and it helped me clarify my thinking. There are times when I actually am doing a coaching session and I'll open up the book myself and be like, oh, right, that's right. That's one of the things. It's hard to keep it all in your head all the time. So now I have it as a reference too.
Yeah, that's good. You look and say, wow, who wrote that? That's pretty good stuff. Yeah.
And that's why I love the book, because a lot of the concepts when you're dealing with a hard child, which hard stands for hurting, angry, rejecting, distant child.
Hurt, angry, rejecting, distant. Sorry.
Distant, right. Thank you. But some of the concepts are really counterintuitive. And so I love that we can go back to the book. Wait, what was it again? Because it feels like I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, this is shaky ground that parents are on. And so I love that there's a resource guide. So thank you so much for writing the book. We've already referred it to several of our coaching clients that are struggling to communicate with their children that are in very difficult circumstances.
Sure.
So I think the most counterintuitive aspect, just to build on what you said, is what do you do when your child accuses you of doing something that you didn't do? Because intuition, logic, human nature all push you to the wrong thing, which is to tell the child, that's ridiculous. I didn't steal your college money. Or, that's not true. Or who told you that? Those are sort of that's the hit parade of things not to do. But that's human nature to want to say, what are you talking about? That's nonsense. I didn't do that. And that doesn't work. But the opposite doesn't work either, which is to say, well, if you think I did it, I guess I did. Or I'm sorry for anything and everything you think I did. That doesn't really satisfy. And it's not authentic to the parent. So that was the thing that my clients just kept asking me. And so that's why I developed this thing called the 5 steps. And then I ended up saying it over and over and over again. And that's, one of the things that ended up in the book.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So we would love to talk about the 5 steps. But before we launch into that, I'm wondering if you could describe a hard child to us. What are some of the typical behaviors or some possible reasons or circumstances that might lead to a child becoming hard towards a parent? What creates this dynamic? I know it's a big, huge question, but if you can kind of boil it down into a nutshell for our listeners, that'd be awesome.
Well, most of my clients have children who are hurt, angry, rejecting, distant. That's the acronym HARD. Most of them, their children are hard to deal with. Their hearts are hardened and they're going to have a harder life. That's sort of how I came to it. Most of them have children who are hard because the other parent is instigating the child to feel hurt and angry with the parent. And so there's a couple of sort of truths that I just sort of dropped in there. The first is when a child is hurt, angry, rejecting, distant, it's because they feel rejected by the parent. So they're behaving in a very unpleasant, difficult way. But underneath that is because they have been misled to believe that the parent who they're rejecting has been unsafe, unloving, and unavailable to them. So the driving force underneath that hardness is a wound.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, well put. And we went through that ourselves when my daughter was 12, and it was extremely painful. It's a journey that is just so difficult to understand, especially when you're a parent that you're going, oh, wait a minute, I never rejected you. I was never unsafe. What's going on here? Like you're right. Your natural instinct is to defend yourself, but we know that that's not the best way to respond.
So what I hear you saying, Amy, is that the root of it is a wound inside this child who actually believes that these things are true about that parent. And so just like if we're wounded and we believe those things about somebody, then our heart is going to be hardened and we're probably going to be hard to deal with. Yeah. Would that be true?
Yeah, I would tweak that a little bit and say they don't really actually care that much sometimes about the thing they say they care about. You stole my college money. You could show them the money's still in the account and it wouldn't matter. The wound is deeper than any particular thing. The wound is that they don't feel that the parent loves them.
Right.
And that's the problem with saying, what are you talking about? I didn't steal your college money. That's not very loving. In fact, if you say to a child, that's ridiculous, you're calling your child an idiot. And if you say to your child, you know that's not true, you're calling them a liar. Right. And if you say, who told you that? You're saying, I think you're being manipulated, which could be true, but nobody likes to think that they're being manipulated.
Sure.
So people don't even think advertising works. There's like lots of research on that. People think when they go into the grocery store, they're actually selecting laundry detergent based on, a carefully thought out analysis. It's the swirly pattern on the box, where the box is on the shelf, the music that's playing. We're all subject to manipulation and undue influence, but to tell somebody that offends them. So the thing that you think you can do to undo the lie actually reinforce the lie.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and accusing the other parent of manipulating or pointing fingers at them or throwing them under the bus just almost reinforces their drive towards that other parent.
Yeah. Because you're insulting the child. If you say, did your mother tell you that? You're saying, I think that you're being lied to and you're too stupid to know that you're being lied to. It never works. I don't know one case where the parent has said, as a matter of fact, that's a lie or that didn't happen. And the kid says, oh, gee, thanks for telling me. Now I'm not mad at you anymore.
Right.
It's the feeling in the moment has to be loving. So if you say, that's ridiculous, that's a harshness in your tone that doesn't feel loving to the child.
Yes.
So that's the whole problem that I created the 5 steps for. How do you address the lie without reinforcing the lie?
Right.
How do you correct it without reinforcing it? And it is possible, but it takes a lot of effort and care and thought to do it right.
And I heard you talking earlier about safety, love, and availability. And if we can take one step toward undoing the lie through that kind of attachment, is what I heard you talking about earlier. What's one thing where do we start? Like, what's one thing a parent can do to start working on that safety, love, and availability?
Show you care in the moment. So these are sort of trivial examples, but I write about them in the book. So that's sort of what's in my head. If your child asks you for ice cream for breakfast, right? You could say, that's ridiculous. We don't eat ice cream for breakfast. Or, we don't eat ice cream for breakfast. Or did your father tell you to, right? And we've already gone through why that doesn't work. And you've basically humiliated the child. But the opposite isn't to dish up ice cream for breakfast, right? And this is where people get stuck. They think it's either you set that boundary and set that limit, or you give them something. Now, in my mind, the best way to respond is to say, oh man, I wish ice cream were a healthy breakfast. It's called joining the wish, and it makes the child feel cared about.
Yeah, and heard.
And that's what allows them to receive that limit, because you're not going to give them ice cream for breakfast, but at least you can say, I wish I could give you ice cream for breakfast. You can have ice cream later. Now you can choose between waffles and pancakes. And that really helps because the child feels cared about. Likewise, let's say your child asks for something and you're going to say yes. Can you drive me to the mall? If you're going to do it with love. Because if you grumble and complain and it introduce tension and negativity into that moment, that's what the child will remember. You might think, wow, I'm such a hero. I drove my kid to the mall when I didn't feel like it. But the kid's going to think, wow, that parent is such a downer, such a
right
or whatever. Because we all respond to the feeling.
Yeah.
Sure.
As just one more example, let's say your child asks you for $20 and you have it and you want to give it to them. Maybe you even owe it to them, like you borrowed it, now you're going to pay back. You could literally crumple up a $20 bill and throw it at your child, or you could say, "Here, yeah, it's a good time for me to give you 20. Go have fun."
Yeah.
In both instances, the child is getting money, but what a world of difference based on the feeling that they're getting from you, the parent. So it's not about agreeing with everything your child says. It's not about giving them everything they want. It's about showing that you care. That part is very basic, but it's hard to remember when you're aggravated, because these kids, part of what makes them hard to deal with is that they're provocative. They're being wound up by the other parent to antagonize you, to push your buttons, call you by your first name or demean you or, show preference for the other parent or whatever they're doing. Right. They're making the targeted parent feel defeated, demoralized, depressed, helpless, hopeless, or angry, agitated, whether it's sort of the passive, sad, depressed side or the agitated, angry side. Both of those negative experiences infuse the relationship and reinforce the idea that you don't love your child.
Yeah.
That's really powerful.
True.
So it's really what we're talking about, or a piece of what we're talking about here, is the tone with which I make the decisions and set the limits that need to be set.
I totally agree. I just even though I use the phrase setting limits, I actually really find it irksome how much emphasis there is out in the psychosphere right now about setting limits and boundaries. It's sort of like all the rage. And I encourage my clients to never use that language with the child. Like, I need to set a boundary with you, or I need to set a limit with you, because I think it's humiliating and demeaning. And a boundary is like a wall. It's not kind. You can just, like, let's say your child spits at you and you don't want to be spit at. Let's take that as a given. You don't want to be spit at. You don't want to say to, right. Maybe there's somebody out there, but most people don't want to be spit at. It's very uncomfortable. And you don't have to say to the child, I need to set a limit with you. That's unacceptable. I find that to be harsh and confrontational and adversarial. And I think it's much nicer to say, you must be very upset. I want to know what's going on. The spitting is very unpleasant for me. Can you tell me what's going on without spitting? So you're protecting yourself. Everybody has a right to say, hey, I don't want to be, hit or kicked or looked at like I'm an idiot or whatever the unpleasant behavior is. But you can give your child feedback without using that, to me, very harsh, demeaning language of limits and boundaries.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you have a whole chapter on being a positive parent. And that's what's so important, is showing up well, even when you're hurting inside. And that means that the parent has to learn how to manage their own emotions so that they can show up well for their child, which is tough. It's tough. I remember
being a role model of self-regulation, right? We can't ask our children to behave better if we can't even behave better. So that's a good point that you're raising. And that is something that I definitely focus on in my coaching, is what can you do when first of all, what is happening in your body that lets you know that you're upset? Like for me, my throat closes. I can feel it sort of constricting. Some people blush, some people start sweating. Some people feel it in their heart rate. Some
Yeah.
people feel nauseous. So to just be attuned to your own body. And then what can you do if you are feeling upset and you're in the middle of something with your child so that you can be a role model for them of self-regulation, which doesn't mean swallowing your feelings. Sometimes it might mean saying, gee, I'm kind of worked up right now. I need to go take a second and calm myself down. Or maybe it's saying in front of your child, this is getting kind of intense. I'm going to take 3 breaths right now. And maybe you want to do it with me. If not, that's okay. But I'm going to do it to calm my central nervous system down.
Yeah, I love that.
That's powerful.
Yeah, you have a whole chapter on how not to take the bait. And it's tough when you've got a kid coming at you and saying really challenging things and basically, assassinating your character right in front of you. It's hard not to take the bait. I'm wondering what you would say you tell us a story in the book of a child who refuses to eat dinner with the family and just wants to be up in their room all the time. They just come for visitation. They go straight up in their room. They lock themselves in there. And one of your approaches to build love is to leave them a little snack up there, or leave them a little treat or something, or even a little note or something that makes them feel loved, even when they're refusing to spend time with you and rejecting you. I personally love that. However, I can also see parents struggling with things like that. It feels like they're rewarding bad behavior. And I can just hear all the commentators from family, friends, or their new spouse of, why are you letting them get away with this? You've got to teach them that they can't just go, isolate and ignore us. That's not okay. You're the parent. So I remember when I was in this situation of feeling this pull of, I want to be a responsible parent. I want to teach my child to be, respectful and not to lie and all these things. And yet at the same time, I'm not in a position to do that right now because it's not going to be well received. And then I would feel a lot of shame and judgment from others who didn't necessarily understand the whole picture of the situation, because very few people do unless they're walking through it, and kind of like, why are you letting your kid do that? How come they're getting away? Well, you need to get in there. You need to set her straight. And so what would you say to that parent that's kind of stuck in this place of, I want to be a good parent. I want to step up and teach my child how to behave. And at the same time, these dynamics, these circumstances I find myself in are just so overwhelming. I don't know how to do that and follow these awesome protocols in your book, which are very loving.
So I think there's 2 main points I want to respond with. The first is, I often suggest to my clients that they do not talk about their parent-child difficulties with people who mean well, but really don't understand how, as you said earlier, counterintuitive this dynamic is. Because your friends and family, presumably, love you best of all. And so for the people who complain about their kids to their parents, say, or cry to their parents about their heartache and grief over what's happening, that parent loves you, the parent who's suffering, and is going to tell you, you need to put your foot down and don't be a doormat and blah, 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 because that's what makes sense to them and because they're trying to alleviate your suffering. So if you're a targeted parent, sadly, you have to be selective about who you talk to this situation about. Because not everybody gets it, and well-meaning people will give you bad advice. In fact, I go so far as to tell people, if you're in individual therapy, here are the 2 topics I think you should be talking about. why did you marry this person in the first place? Like, what is it in your history that attracted you to that person so that you don't do that again? And how can you regulate your emotion? How can you live your life and find meaning and purpose and joy given that you are suffering? But do not talk to them about what do I do when my kid, says F you to me, because your therapist is going to tell you, because they care about you, they're going to tell you, put your foot down and either walk away, right? Give your kids space. They'll come around when they're ready. Terrible advice. Or put your foot down. You can't let them walk all over you. Also, often terrible advice.
Right. Backfires.
Yes. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, why should we be nurturing towards a child who's rejecting us? And I'll say the best example that I can think of is The Runaway Bunny. So I recommend to all my clients that they read. It's a baby book, right? It's a book written and illustrated by the same people who did Goodnight Moon, one of the most beloved baby books out there. And in The Runaway Bunny, it's a baby bunny, and he keeps saying he's going to run away, right? That's why he's called the Runaway Bunny. He says, I'm going to become a flower in a hidden garden, and I'm going to be a bird that flies away. I'm going to be a boat that sails away. I'm going to join the circus and become a trapeze artist. And the mother bunny, she never gets angry. She never gets hurt. She never forgets that she has meaning to her son. She understands that this is what he needs to go through. And because of that, because she holds the value of the relationship in her heart, she responds with love. So she says, well, if you become a bird that flies away, I will be a tree that you come home to. I mean, it's just, it's so beautiful. And I think that we have to channel our inner mother bunny. That's what this situation requires. The idea of like behaviorism, if you give somebody something nice when they're suffering, they're going to continue to suffer. That's sort of a behaviorist Skinnerian approach. That's really outdated. I don't think anybody really, there's no evidence that that's the good kind of child rearing.
Yeah, you conquer that in the book. You explain it really well in the book of why that just don't get caught up in that. It's just not helpful.
And the other piece of it is you don't have the luxury of exercising parental authority in this situation because your authority has been eroded. If it's that bad that your kid is like locked up in their room the whole time, if you're in a situation where you say to your child, it's time to clean your room, and the kid flounces off to the other parent, every time you ask them to do something, there isn't that much. I'm not saying there's nothing, but just a traditional, well, you didn't clean your room, so you're not going to go out for ice cream tonight, doesn't make sense. The other parent can always rescue them. So you have to, in my opinion, you have to prioritize. Ideally, you can both teach your child how to be respectful and maintain the relationship. And most of my coaching is trying to help people do both. But push comes to shove. It's better to leave that granola bar in a bottle of water and a note to your child saying, I know this is a rough patch. I love you, and I believe we're going to get through this, because that's what's going to help in the long run, rather than starving your child in their room.
Wow. Yeah, and they're up in their room thinking, wow, my parent was thinking about me, and they care about me.
Right. I wonder if we could dig a little deeper, Amy. Let's imagine Kim and I are your clients and you're helping us. And Kim, being bio mom, is the one being alienated, and she's stuck in that place she was just describing of, wow, what Amy's saying really makes sense. And I want to leave the granola bar and the bottle of water in my daughter's room.
Be loving.
But stepdad is going, are you kidding me? This kid is disrespectful and we need to set limits, right? How do you talk to a step parent who doesn't have that same level of biological connection with that child, to understand what's really going on under the surface, and how do you help me become an advocate for the future relationship of this woman that I love and her daughter, as opposed to an opposing party.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's great. Great question. Generally, I don't actually work with couples. It does happen sometimes, but not
Okay.
often. But I do have clients who share with me that the other person, their current spouse isn't really on board with the err on the side of generosity.
Yeah.
My philosophy is the step parent really doesn't have an active role.
Mm.
When values or opinions aren't in alignment, you know, I don't know if this is old school or not, but I really do follow the guideline that the bio parent or the primary parent needs to set the tone and make the primary decisions. And
Yes.
it's the parent's job to be the supporter. And if there's any disagreement, it has to happen outside of, the earshot of the kids.
Yeah.
So I have once or twice told a step parent, like, this is my opinion, take it or leave it, but I think you
Mhm.
need to back off
Mm.
because this is the path. If somebody's coming to me, it's because they're receptive to my, approach. And this is the path that, let's say, Kim, that you've chosen. And Mark, it would be your job to be supportive and not fight against it. I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach. I tell people, like, back off, like,
Sure.
I'm kind of bossy, I'm
Yeah.
directive. And sometimes that helps, sometimes people just need to hear, like,
Yes.
this is not your role. Your role as a step parent, like, you're not going to be called dad.
Yep.
You don't have an equal say. That's the
Yep.
reality. You've married somebody who has a pre-existing relationship.
Mhm.
And, ideally, in a perfect world, you would be in alignment all the time.
Yeah.
But you're not.
Nope.
It's not 50-50.
And
Yep.
Mike was very supportive through our
Sure.
journey with parental alienation. But I just want to say, if you're a step parent listening to this and struggling to hear this, it doesn't work out well to set hardline boundaries with your spouse, because if they do move forward with those boundaries and really, set the kids straight and do what the
Try
step
to.
parent thinks that they should be doing, and that child pulls even further away or starts to refuse visitation,
Yeah.
that couple relationship is not going to stand.
Yeah.
I mean,
Resentments will build,
oh,
and that's going to create a problem for the couple.
so much pain and anger and resentment right there.
Mhm.
And so you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
Go in and make demands and insist that you need to parent this way and this isn't right and this child should know better,
Mm.
and not listen to the excellent advice of Amy's
Yeah.
book. I mean, it really is incredible.
And I think our listeners probably would know that, Amy, we would agree with you. There's definitely times where we have to tell step parents it's time to back off.
Yeah.
And yet that's hard. I think in my worst moments were the times where I didn't back off, and I'm going, what the heck are you thinking? Right. In my best moments, there were times where I said, hey, this is what I see. This is what I think, but you need to make a decision, and whatever you decide, I'll back up.
Yeah, he did.
And I'll tell you what, how many times Kim made the choice that I didn't agree with, and then I'm going, oh, great, but I told her I have to back her up. So guess what? I have to back her up. Right. And sure, is it hard? Absolutely. It's difficult. Is it impossible? Absolutely not.
Yeah. You can work as a team.
For sure. Yeah.
And you definitely don't want to heap more grief and stress on a poor targeted parent, because it's so hard to feel any kind of pride or confidence, right? You're getting all these messages. You don't matter. You're not a good parent. I'm not saying this. I'm saying those are messages you're getting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we don't want to add more of that to the targeted parent.
Yeah, you already feel completely deflated.
Yeah.
And then to have your spouse go, why aren't you parenting your kid? Oh, yeah.
I wonder just if we could kind of take one more little perspective on this, because I think for our audience, who are a lot of couples listening to this, it could bring some value. So, Amy, you said you don't necessarily work with the couple a lot, but you're working with the parent, and that parent has this new partner who is a step parent to their child. And, you would tell the step parent, hey, it's time to back off, right? But let's imagine step parent's not present, and, Kim's your client, and she's expressing, oh, I just can't believe that, Mike wants me to go in there and do this and do this. And what are you going to tell Kim in that moment?
Of how to communicate.
How to deal with me.
Yeah. Okay.
We're putting you to the test here.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think. I might ask him, how can I support you? What could I do that would help you in this situation? And I imagine that Kim would say, well, would you talk to him? And I'd say, well, I'm happy to have him join a session. People have brought their parents into the session, or sometimes their attorney, and we'll do a legal brainstorming, or the child's therapist, and we'll do a case consultation. So it's certainly in my wheelhouse. And so, but I'm trying to think about, what if I said to Kim, what could I do? And Kim said, well, would you talk to him? And I'd say, well, I'm happy to have him join the session. And she asks you, and he says, no, he's not. I then might suggest that you write a letter, and maybe I would help you with that, to express what it is you need from your partner, and to be curious about what is going on for him. Because I would imagine when the step parent is like, you better, what they're feeling is protectiveness towards you.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And it's sort of misguided protectiveness, because you'd rather relate to your kid and have them be unpleasant than to have done something that chased them away for good. And I think that's what the step parent needs to hear, is that you need to be in this, even though it's unpleasant.
Yeah.
You might need to reassure your step parent, I can handle this. See, if you go to your step parent and say, I'm going to be extreme for a moment, I'm going to kill myself, I can't take it anymore, then of course your step parent is going to say, you need to put your foot down. Yeah. So I think it's really having that conversation about what's getting activated in the step parent. I suspect it's protectiveness.
Yeah, and it's not just protectiveness of their spouse, but protectiveness of other children in the home. Right. If the step parent comes in with children that they've raised to be very respectful and well-mannered and to contribute to the household, and now this stepchild of theirs is just, doesn't follow any of the rules and can do whatever they want, and their kids are watching.
It appears that way.
Yeah, it appears that way, and their kids are going, hey, how come we have to do chores but they don't? Or how come they get to sit up and
I think my favorite response is, that's a great question. It doesn't seem fair, does it? But each parent in this family parents their children how they think is best. And right now, this is what Kim thinks is best.
I love that.
Yeah. These are tough dynamics. Really, and there's no single simple answer.
Yeah.
Right. It's very challenging.
Except to care. To be what I call compassionate curiosity. If your spouse isn't helping you, to start by being curious about what's going on for them. If your kids are complaining, to be compassionately curious, right? Not curious for the sake of curiosity, but because you care.
Right.
Yeah. And it is tough. It's hard for the rest of the family. We have 2 mutual children together, and it was tough for them to see the way that my daughter treated me and treated them. And it was a rough go for 3 years.
Right. Absolutely.
It's really difficult.
I'm sorry you went through that. And for your kid, I'm sorry she went through that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you for acknowledging that. It's still tough. She's 20, almost 29, and she still suffers from
some struggles.
Yeah, it's really been hard. I love that you delve into character building. And I thought it was so interesting, because we love that. We teach couples all the time to build their family values and what character traits do you want to raise your kids and what life skills, all of that. We love that. But the 4 that you really zone in on just are amazing. Critical thinking, like help your children to think for themselves. without throwing the other parent under the bus. I mean, you can do all of these without ever even mentioning the other parent.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Integrity. How do we tell the truth even when it's hard? What is the truth? How do we figure that out? Compassion. Of course. How can you empathize and feel for others around you? And then forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I just love all four of those. But I'm wondering if you can give us a few tips on how we can practically teach critical thinking to children that are dealing with these dynamics and are coming at you in a hard way.
Mm.
I think that what I'm going to say applies to all four of those values. I think you have to, first of all, consciously embody and live those values yourself.
Mm.
And I am kind of a fan of talking out loud. Like you're sitting in the car, you're driving and your kid's next to you and somebody's aggravating you, to say, wow, I'm so aggravated. But you know what? Maybe they're having a hard day. And so I'm not going to be rude to them. I'm not going to tailgate or honk. I'm going to give them a little space. So just talking out loud, or I'm so proud of myself. I really did a great job. I'm so happy with how that project turned out. Like just talking out loud to your kids. And of course, noticing when they are exhibiting those things. So if your child says, boy, Sally really hurt my feelings today, but I'm going to still invite her to my party, to say, wow, you're showing forgiveness. I'm noticing that you're forgiving Sally. What helped you do that? So it's not just good girl, you have forgiveness. That's nice to acknowledge it and link their behavior to the value, but then to be interested, what helped you do that?
Yes, I love that.
But you're nurturing those values from the inside, right? Rather than putting them on your child from the outside. Sharing is important, you have to be forgiving. That's just noise. That's blah, blah, blah to kids. But if you can help them identify as somebody who wants to have compassion or appreciates forgiveness, that is, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
And you can find all kinds of examples in this world all around us, the movies and medias and sports heroes. You can find all kinds of examples of people that uphold these values and people that don't.
Oh, yeah.
And you can have those conversations with your kid. What do you think about that? What do you think about that football player that, lied about, this or failed their drug test? Wow. Do you think that upholds integrity? What do you think?
What would you do? So connected, because there is research that shows that kids learn most when the content is related to them, right? So if you're teaching math, you have 3 jelly beans and Sally gives you 2 jelly beans. That's a whole lot more than what's 3 plus 2, right? So if you can connect it to their life, what would you do? What do you think you would do if you were in that situation?
Wow.
Yeah, I love that question you asked as well. One of the things we work with our couples on is really in line with what you were just describing, of how can we help them to connect that behavior with the value when we give praise. And I think it's not a typical thing for us as parents to name verbally the value when we're giving that praise. Yeah. But then I love, I don't think I've ever thought about it that way, as just adding that question in of, hey, what helped you to do that?
Yeah, I love that.
That's critical thinking and examining their own heart and their own mind of, oh yeah, why is it okay for me to have her come to the party, even though I'm still kind of mad at her? That's powerful. Thank you, Amy. Yeah.
Yeah. So living it out ourselves, talking out loud, talking about it, noticing when our children live these values out and asking these questions and helping them to really, to make that link of the value and the behavior and how did I get there?
Yeah.
Are there any other tips you might have?
Well, they're probably in the book, but I'm not anything off the top of my head.
That's okay.
It's noticing when your children are doing it anyways, and then being conscious of trying to do that for yourself. So if your child annoyed you and then you do something nice for them, to say, I was a little annoyed earlier, but I've forgiven you. I've gotten past that. And now I'd like to do this nice thing. So it's bringing to the surface in many, many different ways those values. And other values are important, perseverance and
Of
grit
course.
and creativity, but they're not as related to alienation. If your child does not value forgiveness, then you're in trouble as a parent, because all parents hurt, frustrate, and disappoint their kids. And alienation works when the other parent convinces the child, or tries to convince the child, that whatever your normative flaws are, they are unforgivable. That's how it works. That's how your child ends up in their room or not coming, because they feel that not only have you done some terrible thing, but that you don't deserve to be forgiven. So if you can instill in them forgiveness, that's going to be less likely to happen.
Right.
Or there's one grain of truth that gets manipulated and
Or amplified.
Yeah, it gets a different narrative put on it. That's kind of what happened to me. Was my daughter was told that when she was young, when she was 2, that I abandoned her and didn't want her and took off and left her with her dad. And the truth was that I did leave for 19 days to check myself into a drug rehab center so that I could be a healthy mom. And I never, left her, but I was away from her. And so he took that little 19 days, even though I had been there,
For years.
yeah, until she was 12 years old. And he spun that as she left you and didn't want you. And it took me a while to find an opportunity to speak truth without saying, well, that's not true, or that never happened. I had to bide my time and patiently wait for the right opportunity to say, hey, remember I told you that, I had a problem with drugs and alcohol and I went to a treatment center. Yeah, I was there for about 19 days. And you could see the light bulb go off. Like all of a sudden she was like, what? And I said, yeah, that was one of the best things I ever did. I would not have been a good mom to you if I hadn't gotten clean and sober. And, her dad is still dabbling in addiction, and she knows the difference between the two homes. And that little tiny, we call it putting a pebble in the shoe. A little pebble in her shoe made her stop and think, wait a minute, that's not what my dad's been telling me. But I didn't have to say a word about him. And I used an example of a friend of ours who went to treatment. She was struggling with anorexia, and she left her family to go get treatment. And I asked my daughter, do you think she made the right choice, leaving her kids and going and getting help? And my daughter said, absolutely. She needs to do that for herself. So I waited right until that came up. And then I just, told her the truth. And she put it all together on her own. And I didn't have to say anything about her.
It was a turning point.
It was the turning point. Yeah. But it took so much patience on my part to live with her thinking that I abandoned her. That was so painful.
Yeah.
I do think if you had come to me, I'm not sure I would have suggested waiting versus not waiting. I would have, I think, put some, and maybe you felt in your gut and your heart that she wasn't receptive. But to me, the most important thing is before you correct it, well, I was only gone 19 days, right? That's sort of the correction, right? And I had a good reason, right? That's part of the correction. To me, the most important thing is that before you do that, you acknowledge the child's feelings and be interested in them. So if let's say she's screaming at you, you abandoned me. See, I would go back to the 5 steps. You have to start by thanking your child for sharing. So, I really want to know what's bothering you. I'm so glad I understand what it is that you feel like I abandoned you. That's so helpful for me to know. And then to be compassionate in the moment. Like I can see how hurt or angry, whatever you are thinking about, that time when I wasn't home.
Yeah.
And then there's some, I don't want to go through the whole 5 steps, but then you can do the correction. And so the thing that I sort of agree with what you're saying is that there has to be a receptivity. You don't just start with, oh, well, that was only 19 days and I did it because I was sick.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's like pulling out the bank statement and the kid doesn't care, right?
Yeah.
Just saying, nope, you're wrong. I didn't abandon you. Doesn't work.
I would have loved to have gone to you back then, Amy. When I read your book, that's the first thing I thought was, how come I didn't find her back then? Because I was so lost. And it was so painful and difficult.
It was.
You had a moment of connection. That's powerful.
It was powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a turning point that I was grateful for.
Yeah. Amy, I can imagine there's some couples that are listening and, sometimes they're recognizing behavior in a child or hearing certain things, maybe coming from an ex, but they're wondering, okay, are we really in an alienation position? Do we really have a child who is, hard, hurt, angry, rejecting, and distant? How do you help them kind of understand where that, I don't know if it's a line or how do they go, yeah, actually we are suffering from this?
Are there some warning signs that parents can be looking for?
Yeah.
Because we were completely blindsided.
So I think there's two ways to think about it. One is warning signs in the child, basically, or that they stop trusting you. They become sort of suspicious of your motivations. They seem to have distorted ideas. So let's say you said to your child, how was school today? And your child says, well, you never cared before. And you know that you have cared and shown you care. That's a distortion. That's a sign that something is up, right? Because kids feel angry, they feel hurt, et cetera, by a parent. But if it's sort of consistently out of proportion, you give a sibling a slightly, bigger lamb chop or something, and you never loved me, so I think it's sort of a consistent pattern of suspiciousness and lack of receptivity to your parenting. And certainly if it happens as the kid is coming back from the other parent. So, if it takes an hour or a day or two, and then you think, okay, now I got my kid back. That's a sign that something probably is going on in that other house that is creating in the child this experience that they can't trust that you love them. In terms of warning signs, in terms of the behavior of the other parent, well, there's the 17 primary parental alienation strategies. That's what research tells us are the things that a parent can do that can foster the child's unjustified rejection of the other parent. And I often recommend to my clients to do a pretty thorough, careful, objective analysis of which behaviors, if any, the other parent is engaging in, and to actually create a chart. And the chart has 3 columns. The left column is the behavior, bad mouthing, limiting contact, whatever. The middle column is the actual behavior, like didn't drop the child off on Saturday when they were supposed to. And then the far right column is the evidence. See email of, see text message on, I observed this myself. Because a lot of times people mix up the behavior of the child with the behavior of the other parent. So somebody could say to me, I know my ex is bad-mouthing me to the kids. Oh, how do you know? Well, what else could it be? My kids are mad at me all the time. That's an inference. That's not evidence. Or I know my kids are calling me by my first name. Therefore, it must be true that the other parent is telling them to do it. No. 3-year-olds, for example, love to call their parents by their first name because they just discovered that mommy and daddy have other names. So, I encourage them to go through their emails, their text messages, all their evidence, things they saw with their own eyes, heard with their own ears, or somebody credible. The teacher says, hey, mom, I just want you to know that your ex-husband is trash talking you to the kid. So you have to go through all your evidence, create that chart. And then, you're either going to say, oh, it's not as bad as I thought, right? You might say, wow, you know what? It's really pretty bad. We've got 100 examples of bad mouthing and 15 examples of limiting contact and 10 examples of this. And there's a lot going on.
Right. Yeah.
And then at least depending on your finances and your court situation and the age of your kids, you may need to try to do something about it legally. But at least you know what you're dealing
Yes.
with.
Yeah. Oh, that's such wise advice.
Absolutely. I know I look back and I think I know that we struggled a lot, but I think I wish we would have done that earlier in the
Yeah.
journey.
I was in disbelief. This
Yeah.
can't be happening. This
Yeah.
can't be happening. And it was happening. And it was just so, because we had co-parented great for 10 years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was
Yeah.
no longer necessary part of her life. It was just the weirdest thing. So yeah, that would have been helpful to really have that in black and white
Yeah.
and looking for that
Yeah.
evidence.
Seeking the evidence and not just going with our gut.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. That's really
Sometimes it's
helpful.
worse. Sometimes people are like, oh my God, I didn't realize that 13 of the 17 are happening. I need to do something, or I need to think about whether I can and want to do something. At least you're making an informed decision.
Yes. That's great. Thank you so much for that, Amy.
Yeah. Thank you for that advice.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, Amy, as we wrap up our conversation, which has just been so rich, I'm just so grateful that you came to be on our show today. I'm wondering if you could give parents, targeted parents struggling with a hard child, if you could give them just one or two simple things they can do today to start enhancing their attachment by communicating safety, love, and availability to their child. Like, what's the simplest, the lowest hanging fruit that they can just start doing right out of the gate?
I would say the North Star is connect, don't correct. And I know I'm not saying that's simple though. That's big, that's the 10,000-foot view. But it is the guiding star. I tell parents, if you're trying to change your child's mind, you're on the wrong train. Like, get off at the next stop. The goal is to show that you care. And again, just as an example, that might be kind of a safe one. If your kid comes home from school and says, why do I have to learn math anyway? It's so dumb. Many parents will just start lecturing about, oh, you need math for banking and cooking and blah, 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 blah. And you have no idea what's going on with your child. Maybe the teacher's mean, maybe they failed a test, maybe they can't see the blackboard. Like, you have to care, you have to connect and say, like, wow, you're not happy with math right now. What's going on?
Tell me more.
Yeah, tell me what's going on. Be interested and stop trying to be the boss. I have a client who just wants to be a teacher. And I'm like, be a Sunday school teacher. Your kid does not want to be lectured. He wants to feel that you care.
That's funny you say that, because some of the most difficult step parents to work with are the ones that are teachers, because they come in and they just have it all laid out. And
I know how to deal with kids.
And I know about kids, and and it's so funny.
Right? For a teacher, it's all about behavior management, but that's not what parenting is. A relationship.
Yes, agreed. No offense to all those teachers who are step parents out there.
I know it's hard.
It is hard. I think what I love about that, actually, I mean, we have been grateful for really the exact wording that you just said, but from a step parent perspective, because Patricia Pappernow, a blended family expert, that's exactly what she says is the number one rule of thumb, especially in the beginning, is connection over correction for a step parent. You've got to build a relationship in order to have if you have any hope of having influence. And so we have to follow the same rules.
Yeah.
So, Amy, you give that advice to somebody and they say, okay, I got you. Now, I've been connecting before correcting for a long time. And it doesn't seem to be getting me anywhere. What do you say to that person?
I guess I would have to hear an example, because they might think they're connecting, but really, there might be something in their tone of voice. I do sometimes say to clients, I think you're very angry at your child, and I think that anger is getting in the way.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do remind my clients, like, who picked this parent for your child? Did your child pick this parent? No, you did. It's like, how can you be mad at your child? They didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask for that person, the alienator, to be their parent. They didn't ask to be manipulated. If you believe in alienation and you believe in the process of undue influence, how can you be holding your child accountable? And it's the parents who underneath think, well, he's really choosing to treat me this way. He's choosing. He could just stop it if he wanted. My child could just, put their foot down with the other parent and say, stop manipulating me. And that's not true. And I do encourage people. I say, what if your child was abducted by a kidnapper and the kidnapper warped your child's behavior, and then you get your child back and they look different and smell different and act different? Would you be mad at them? And the answer is like, of course not. Well, that applies to this situation.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
in my experience, when my advice isn't working, it's because the parent is still angry. So I try to work on that with them.
Yeah, and you do vacillate back and forth from loving your child and wanting to care for them to being so angry and hurt. It's back and forth, back and forth. It's very difficult. Well, thank you so much, Amy. This has been amazing. So many helpful nuggets. I really love what you said about holding the value of the relationship in your heart. I love that.
Yeah.
Because that child is still there. I learned when my daughter finally came out of it that she was still there, and all those memories that we had before, they were still intact, and the love, she still loved me. But during that 3-year period, boy, I didn't see any of it. I thought it was all gone, and it was devastating. But I just encourage a targeted parent to really stay focused on that relationship in your heart. Your child is still there, and to get this book, we didn't even talk about the last 2 parts of the book. That's all about how to practically communicate. This book is so practical via text, via letter, in person. It's amazing. So I just really thank you for writing the book, Amy.
Absolutely.
I really do. Like I said, I wish we'd had it back
totally.
back when we were dealing with this.
I wish I had a time machine.
Yeah.
You got your daughter back. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Yes. We've been blessed for sure.
Yeah.
So we will put a link in the show notes to Parenting Under Fire by Amy Baker. Super excited for those of you listening who say, I need that book. We want you to go and grab a copy. And Amy, if somebody wants to reach out to you, maybe they're in need of coaching, how do they find you?
I have an email. I have an email, but I also have a website, which is my name, amyjlbaker.com. And on my website, there's a coaching page, and it explains what I do, what I don't do, what I charge, blah, 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 how to get started. It's all there. And the website is my name, amyjlbaker.com.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we've heard good things. We have a couple we coach that actually coach with you, and they've had nothing but amazing things to say.
Absolutely.
And they've had some success.
For sure.
We just are so thankful for the work that you're doing, Amy. Thank you.
And again, we'll put a link in the show notes to the book as well as to Amy's website. And if something moved you today and you want to reach out, please don't hesitate. Just scroll on down and click the link. Amy, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. It's so valuable and a really rich conversation. What you're doing to help parents is invaluable. So thank you.
Yes, thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much.
Great questions. It was a great conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, keep up the good work. We appreciate you.
Back at you.
Thanks, Amy.
Bye for
All right.
now.
Bye-bye.
Does it ever feel like people just don't get how tough it is to blend a family? What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blended family life. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple,
creating more connection as a family,
experiencing partnership in parenting,
and even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you'll get to connect with us, and maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through. Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll gain access to a variety of resources like our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated, and quality support can sometimes be expensive and hard to find. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate, because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive regardless of their budget.
So scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes and click the link to join us in the Blending Together community and meet other couples just like you in our upcoming community meeting. Plus, when you join before the end of the month, you'll gain access to our brand new bonus mini course that will help you make quick headway. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today. We can't wait to meet you inside Blending Together. Just click the link all the way at the bottom of the show notes to get started.
We'll see you there.